Well, there is actually something to take into consideration when it comes to Megumi in this video, with it being his strongest and most powerful Shikigami yet. This Shikigami would be the Zenin clan's secret weapon, with it being able to help them take out some of the toughest of opponents, allowing them to even fight back a user of even the limitless technique. And with Gojo being the strongest character in Jujutsu Kaisen, this lets us only think about how strong this Zenin clan secret weapon actually is if it's able to even battle someone like Gojo. One of Gojo's ancestors, because as it would turn out, both of the previous heads of the Zenin clan and the Gojo clan would end up fighting and having a dispute. And this would all happen before royalty in of itself would even be conceptualized in the world of Jujutsu, before the aristocracy. So that gives us a nice and fine idea about what kind of potential these guys could have had with these techniques being out in the wild, fighting and fending for themselves, without social status and many other things tying them down. With both figures using the 10 Shadows technique and the Limitless technique, with this fight, you could easily draw a parallel between a fight when it comes to Gojo battling Megumi. Gojo himself would even put some fruit for thought into this idea. And I know you're wondering, just what is the significance of this when it comes to me talking about a god like Shikigami? Well, you see, this has everything to do with the god like Shikigami, because what this conversation between Gojo and Megumi is telling us is that this Shikigami has the potential to fight even Gojo himself, giving Megumi enough potential to even be able to battle and possibly win against Gojo. If you don't think winning against Gojo doesn't seem godly enough as it is, I don't really know what to tell you. As we get into this, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment how you feel, and watch the video until the very end. I would greatly appreciate it because it would help me make more content. But the Shikigami would be godly because of its amazing powers. Who would have guessed it? I definitely did not. This Shikigami would be so powerful that not a single user of the 10 Shadows technique would have ever been able to defeat it and exercise it. This is actually very interesting because without anyone actually being able to defeat this thing, how are they able to summon this Shikigami? Well, you see, they don't have to actually own the Shikigami to be able to summon it. This works because you can summon a Shikigami in an attempt to try and battle it and make it your own, and this would allow Megumi to be able to summon this godlike Shikigami. When Megumi does this, he not only forces his opponent to fight Mahoraga, but also himself. But as per usual, like we already know, there is definitely a catch, and so anyone that is involved in this ritual, if they end up dying, they're gonna cause Megumi to also die as well, and vice versa. Really taking this behemoth into consideration, you can see why a previous user of the Six Eyes and the Limitless would have ended up losing so many years ago. But rituals aside, what exactly makes this monster so strong? Well, you see, it would be the very fact that it has so many perks underneath its belt, it can probably, most definitely, take on any and every single situation that you put it through when it comes to killing it. Long story short, this thing is Doomsday from Superman. One of its most powerful assets would be its Sword of Extermination. The Sword of Extermination would be a weapon that would be completely consumed by positive energy, which would be no different than reversed cursed energy. The thing is, both this sword and a sorcerer like Satoru, for instance, Satoru would use reverse curse technique, but he would use this to not only refresh his brain, but also be able to regrow any limbs that are damaged and heal his body. Yet, this weapon that Mahoraga uses is a weapon that is covered in energy that is used to heal, which makes it very special in a sense because cursed spirits are made out of negative energy. The thing is, Mahoraga would fight with so much positive energy that it would completely bless and destroy these beings in one hit. Because Mahoraga is a being of positivity and enlightenment. It is made to be a being that will cast down and kill many, let alone an army of gods, to say the least. You can really understand just why it's called the Sword of Extermination, and if that isn't enough, he can see any and every curse technique, even curse techniques that really would be impossible for the naked eye to even come into contact with Sukuna's dismantle being one of them, with it being a sword slice that happens out of thin air instantaneously. Mahoraga has enough speed and vision to be able to react to such a thing, and even Sukuna would be caught by surprise when Mahoraga deflects one of his attacks. And of course, the plot would only thicken because of Mahoraga's most iconic piece, with it being the wheel on his head. This wheel would represent a complete cycle and harmony, with it being reminiscent to life in of itself. And this is only contextualized by Mahoraga's ability, the ability to adapt to any and all phenomena. If you just somehow don't understand what that means, it means that any attack that you hit him with is going to be null and void. It's not going to work. Let's say if you were to set him on fire. After he would be set on fire, his body would get used to that fire, and then fire would no longer hurt him. And even with that being said, he's still able to regenerate while adapting at the same time. If you were to cut his body with a sword, he would get cut, but then he would regenerate right after he took damage from that cut. And then, if you were to hit him with this same sword, it would not even go through his skin. No matter how much power, no matter how much strength, no matter how much force you put behind a sword swing, it will completely do nothing. Let's say we give a sword to the strongest man in the world and tell him to cut Mahoraga. We all know that he's more than capable of cutting Mahoraga in half and killing him, but the very fact that Mahoraga would adapt to the very idea of being cut would make it so that no matter how strong anyone is, the fact that that very principle and idea is something that Mahoraga can just adapt to makes whatever you do useless unless you're just able to kill him in one instant without ever giving him an opportunity to adapt. But even then, the more you attack him, the faster he can adapt. If there's one word to describe Mahoraga, it's unstoppable. Just pray to God you have an attack that is strong enough and that Mahoraga isn't gonna regenerate right after you hit him with that same attack. Now, with all of his attacks and powers out of the way, there's still a lot more that we don't know about when it comes to this godlike being. Its origin, its form, the very fact that such a monstrosity is able to find harmony brings a lot of questions into the brain now, doesn't it? Okay, upon looking at him getting summoned, the very first thing we should take notice of is the 8-handled sword Divergent Sila Divine General Mahoraga title. You see, this name will carry a lot more weight than you would necessarily think, because with the 8-handled longsword, this weapon would without a doubt be one of the 10 sacred treasures, with each treasure being a signification for every single Shikigami that Megumi uses, and Mahoraga would undoubtedly use the sword. Now, there would be a great deal of reference when it comes to the number 8 here. For instance, the 8-handled longsword could reference the 8 legions and the 8-fold path. The 8 legions would happen to be the 8 royal guards that Mahoraga would be a part of. These 8 deities would undoubtedly be the same guardsmen that would protect the Dharma, and Mahoraga would be one of these 8. And then again, this same 8-handled longsword could be referencing the Wheel of Dharma following the 8-fold path. The 8-handled longsword could be referencing the same exact thing that Mahoraga's wheel is referencing: right view, intention, speech, action, livelihood, effort, concentration, and mindfulness. If you want to boil it down to anything, it would practically be living a life without sin, which actually says a lot about Mahoraga, with Mahoraga being a divergent Sila, meaning that he would go away from the teachings of the Sila. The Sila's teachings would end up being a take on morality, with it being right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And with Mahoraga being a divergent Sela, he would go away from his teachings. He would throw away right speech, right action, and right livelihood, and sin. The Sela would have 10 different conditions, and its most important one would be to never take a life. And of course, with the sword of extermination in its hands, you could only guess what kind of path Mahoraga ended up taking if he's going away from the Sela. It's kind of sad, really, because Mahoraga would throw away enlightenment and everything that made him what he was up until a certain point. And as I say this, Mahoraga would be a divine general, and while being a divine general, he would serve under one of the Buddhas of medicine. And so he would betray Buddha and go against all of these things and truly become that of a monster. So what exactly is a Mahoraga? Mahoragas are anthropomorphic beings with serpent-like bodies from the waist down. And of course, this take on Mahoraga would do the exact opposite. Rather than being a serpent from the waist down, he would be a serpent from the neck up. But due to certain artistic traditions, they can sometimes have serpent heads with humanoid bodies. So this is the interpretation that Jujutsu would most likely go for. Now, how exactly would someone become a Mahoraga? This would be a human being that is reborn, and by practicing generosity and upholding the Dharma while being inclined toward anger, this would cause a human being to end up reincarnating into the form of a Mahoraga. And while facing off against Mahoraga, Sukuna would compare Mahoraga to Yamada no Orochi. Yamada no Orochi would be an 8-headed and 8-tailed serpent, and we gotta remember, Mahoraga is like that of a serpent as well. However, when it comes to Yamada no Orochi, he would have trees grow out of his back, and he would be covered in moss. This monster would be so big that it would cover 8 valleys and 8 hills. As insane as Yamada no Orochi would sound, Mahoragas would be just as dangerous, with them being able to lie on their sides and rotate the earth, which would cause earthquakes. This should in fact give you a better idea on just how much of a godlike status Mahoraga really has.